Couple.
We're back, baby.
That's right. You thought we weren't coming back because we're on a slightly delayed schedule this week, but just a day late, not a dollar short.
Yeah, we've just been working hard on other stuff. Who knew?
Yeah, we don't just have this podcast, you know.
I basically just have this podcast, but on occasion, I step up, help you move some lights around for the film you're doing. So
that's right. This is the pod couple, also the filmmaking couple at times. So we're back, and this is a Wednesday that we're recording this on. Make sure that you follow us on Twitter at the pod couple, PODD, and also subscribe to this on iTunes or Stitcher or Blueberry, whatever your service of choice is, and we'll go ahead and get right into it, I guess. We're going to talk some TV, as we usually do at the top here. We wanted to catch up with Breaking Bad.
Breaking Bad, yeah, it's great. What are your feelings on it?
Have you seen this Breaking Bad show?
It's getting a lot of buzz.
There's this teacher, and he ends up selling meth. Breaking Bad's offspring, rather, Better Call Saul. I wanted to catch up with that. They're now 4 episodes deep into that season. We talked about the pilot a couple weeks ago, but you can really see the rest of the season starting to take shape now, and so we wanted to touch base and talk about that. So what do you got for us, Steve?
Well, I'm wondering what you think, Kyle, in terms of Better Call Saul sort of still being under the shadow of Breaking Bad. Since you mentioned Breaking Bad, we might as well talk about this show, the expectations that you have for it, you know, at this point in the season. And do you feel like it's living up to the hype?
I do, definitely. Like I said, I don't feel like it's in Breaking Bad's shadow at all, personally. I think that certainly if you are a fan of Breaking Bad, if you watch the show, then it enriches the experience of watching Better Call Saul, because, you know, some of the characters and there's lots of little callbacks and touches that tie into the Breaking Bad universe. But it's a great show. It stands on its own. And I think, like I said, if I had never seen 1 minute of Breaking Bad, I think I would be totally into this show. You know, one of the contrasts, and we talked about this before, but is how this show is certainly more comedic than Breaking Bad was, even though Breaking Bad had plenty of funny moments. And but this show also has some, you know, definitely has drama in it. And I think what I'm seeing in this season, in the first half of this season here, is they're really starting to take that slow turn into a much darker material.
Oh yeah, for sure. You can see a lot of heartbreak in Jimmy McGill right now. Like, you can see he's really getting beat up. For a guy that was a con man who sort of specialized in doing the old slipping thing, maybe he's slipping a little too far. Maybe he's falling a little too hard. Yeah,
we can kind of see where that's going, again, having watched Breaking Bad, but in some ways that makes it more, I think, even more difficult to watch, because
like watching in a car accident in slow motion.
Right, yeah. It's like, you know, the Titanic's going to hit the iceberg.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter how much you don't want it to do that. And so, this show definitely moves between comedy and drama. And as I was watching these episodes, I was really thinking about how one of the reasons I think they're able to do that so effectively, I mean, besides the quality of the writing, which is tremendous, is Bob Odenkirk's performance and just how adept he is at moving between those two worlds. And that's something that, you know, who would have known? You know, certainly I think he came to really be on a lot of people's radar with Mr. Show, which was a sketch comedy program that was on HBO, I believe, and then he played a lot of sort of comic relief roles after that and things, and even including Breaking Bad, where especially at first his character is almost fully comic relief, and later they develop some more dimensions to him. But
was he supposed to be as big of a part of Breaking Bad as he ended up being, or was it kind of like a Jesse Pinkman situation where he showed up and he like basically kicked ass and they were like, all right, we're just gonna keep you around forever?
Yeah, I mean, my impression from what I've heard is that almost everything in Breaking Bad is like that. It was really not planned out. The show is so well executed that it feels like they had the whole thing planned out, but they really didn't. I mean, they had the basic idea of this arc of this guy going from, they've said it many times, Mr. Chips to Mr. Scarface, or Mr. Chips to Scarface arc. But beyond that, and I think, planning out the first few episodes, they didn't really plan out any of the details in any great level. They really were flying by the seat of their pants. They were just so good at it that it you sort of didn't notice. And I know one of the things that Vince Gilligan talked about was how they would write themselves into a corner and then just had to figure out how to write themselves out. And I think the classic example of that they talked about was when they had the episode in Breaking Bad. And of course, we're going away from Better Call Saul. What the hell? We said we're going to do Breaking Bad.
So you sure it's not in the shadow?
We said we're going to talk about Breaking Bad, so let's do it. No, but there's the episode where I don't remember if it's first or second season or something, but when Hank is outside the RV and Jesse and Walt are trapped inside of it, and it seems like there's no possible way that Walt is not going to get found out at this point. And yeah, that was a scene where when they wrote it, they had no idea how they were, and so they literally had to sit there and hash it out in the writer's room and just figure out how to break Walt out of this situation.
That's pretty interesting because they sort of have done that that kind of technique. Writing yourself into a corner is essentially what they've done with this whole show, because we know exactly where these characters end up. Maybe not exactly where Saul Goodman ends up, because they do, allude to his life post the show, which I still want to see more of, but it'll be interesting to see, and that does contribute to this whole sort of morbid fascination with the lives going downhill, the lives of these people going downhill.
Yeah, and one of the things that this all struck me as I'm watching it is that this show almost could have been called Mike the Cleaner instead of Better Call Saul, and it would have totally worked too. Like I am watching that show, and I would have watched that show. I mean, if they had, the focus is more on Saul, but it's becoming more even-handed.
Yeah, the split's pretty even at this point.
Yeah, I mean, the first season was much heavier to Saul, but you're seeing, and that's something I'm assuming is a deliberate choice, is to make it more even-handed, and had the distribution of screen time been reversed, I think I'd be just as into this show.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So, and it's nice, because
I'd watch Mike just get hit in the face a bunch, just getting hit in the face over and over again. Man, I could watch that for an hour, just taking it.
Yeah, that was a great scene. And just the way he wouldn't let him go, the way he had hold of his shirt, and just shows that. And
he just talked a little bit of shit right before the cops.
Right.
Yeah, it's a brilliant move. That guy's, it's pretty funny because you have Saul Goodman, he's good at laying out plans, but he's also great at improvising. And then you have Mike, and he's sort of the same. He's kind of just one step ahead of everybody else in any given situation. So those two characters kind of operating on a higher level than everybody else.
And I think that one of the reasons this show can continue to work, and this is such a television thing to do, but I think it shows you, obviously Vince Gilligan cut his teeth on X-Files, and, which was very episodic, before TV became so serialized in the more recent years. And while this show certainly is a serialized show, you can see that they're still able to turn into those episodic, almost like side missions. They've done several with Mike.
But it doesn't feel like a distraction from the overall story. It just enriches the world.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I got to take this. It's probably that guy I owe money to.
Probably your stockbroker.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Good. So, and we're back. Turns out I owe that guy more money than I thought. So. Might not be here next week, Kyle. You might be flying solo.
All right. Well, I'm sure I can replace you with somebody just as good, if not better.
Just cardboard cutout of me, and then you're doing the voice.
I'll do it. Yeah,
I'm Steve.
That was a dead-on Steve impression.
Yeah, I do a pretty good Steve impression.
So Yeah, but those sorts of side missions, yeah, they don't feel like padding at all in this show, which is like, and I enjoy them, like they're fun. It's to see, and even like with, and they serve a larger plot too, but like with Jimmy going and doing the cobbler scene, in the police station and seeing that.
Did that not hit you as hard since I spoiled it for you?
Yeah, I was completely ruined. No. I mean, obviously, it was reminiscent, of course, of some of the scenes that he had with Jesse Pinkman in Breaking Bad, which were some of my favorite Saul Goodman scenes when he goes in there and kind of just schools the cops. So it was fun to see like a precursor of that with this episode. So I don't know. I think that what else do we talk about here? I like that you can see the contours of the season taking shape. I like that you can really see the fissure between Saul and the kind of person that he is in his core and the world of, legitimate sort of upscale lawyers, whether it be with his brother, with the relationship with his brother, with his relationship with Kim, with his relationship with the Davis and Maine partners. It's that they're all speaking to that same thing. This is just a world where he doesn't quite fit. He's an incredibly smart guy, incredibly resourceful, basically is actually an excellent lawyer, but he doesn't quite see the reason, or didn't quite see the need to follow the rules to the letter.
He can't fall in line. It's just not part of him.
So, but sort of seeing that's part of that slow motion car crash where you can see those fissures starting to occur, and you can see where they're splitting apart and where they're going to, and you kind of know where they're going to go. But the thing that's most, I think, maybe ominous about that is that we've seen Breaking Bad, and Kim Wexler is not part of Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
So what is going to happen with her?
Right.
Maybe she just goes and gets a nice job at a law firm in New York.
It's like best case scenario, she just leaves him and breaks his heart.
Right.
And that's a pretty sad best case scenario. And also, there's a ton of characters which obviously aren't a part of Breaking Bad. So his brother, we can see, from the latest episode, still not doing well with that weird psychosomatic disease thing he's got going on. So when I see the great Michael McKean on screen, I'm always a little worried. Like, is this going to be the last time I see that dude? So that show's very good at dangling that sort of Damocles.
Right.
In a situation where you essentially know what happens, but in really paying attention to how that happens, this show has come up with some great material.
They really, and also speaking of the Chuck character, they really they really seem to enjoy playing with light and shadow in his house, and I love that from a cinematography standpoint.
Yeah, the show is very well shot.
So and Breaking Bad was as well. One of the more cinematic shows at the time. I think broke a lot of ground and had some directors on it that have gone on to bigger things, and you're seeing some of that same sensibility here with Saul. And like I said, the every time they go into his house, I'm excited just to see how they're going to light it, because using all that natural light coming into the filters or filtering through the windows with all the slat lines and then using all the shadows to sort of almost obscure the characters and bring them in and out of the shadows in a very metaphorical way is pretty interesting. So. What else do you got for us? Any other points you want to make on this?
Not on Better Call Saul. I mean, just watch it. That's all I can tell you. It's one of the best shows on television. Do you know how long the season is?
I don't. I wish I did, because we're at episode 4 now, and I don't know. I assume we're getting close to the halfway point, but I would say somewhere between 8 and 13 is my guess. But we can probably find that out if we actually did some research or prepared well for this podcast.
Come on. I got too many phone calls to take in the middle of a podcast to do research.
That's true.
So what about some other TV things going on?
Well, I mean, I think that one of the things we wanted to talk about here was, some other shows that we have not that are necessarily airing currently, but that have aired in the past that we really enjoyed that we think are kind of under the radar. People may have missed and might want to check out. So give a couple recommendations in that way. Why don't you start, Steve? I know you have one that
Sure. Yeah, I I definitely. It's interesting because there's such a glut of sort of procedural detective type shows. You have shows where something like Sherlock or Elementary, which are basically both Sherlock Holmes' character in the modern day. You have Luther, who's basically like Black Sherlock. He's like super intuitive. You have Lucifer, who's like white devil Sherlock. You have Castle, who's like spunky writer Sherlock. So you see all of these shows, and like the thing that these shows tend to have in common, and I'm not, I watch all those shows, with the exception of Castle, and the thing they all have in common is this just marvelous detective character who's, like Saul Goodman or like Mike Ehrmantraut on another level than everyone else in the show. They can just see things that other people can't see. And my recommendation for a show that I'm surprised when people like, or even if you like something like Broadchurch, which I know you were a fan of, I don't see this ever really recommended anywhere. It's a show called Happy Valley. The first season is on Netflix. It's 6 episodes. They're all an hour long. And the second season is airing right now. So you can go catch up with the first season. I highly recommend it. Just take the cold open to the first episode is 2 minutes and 44 seconds. And like that should be enough to convince you of how great this show is. Because it's anchored by Sarah Lancashire, who plays a police officer named Catherine Kaywood. And she's my favorite police officer on television because she has no superpowers whatsoever. She just shows up to her job and does it. She works like she's the ideal police officer. She knows her community. She cares about everybody in her community, and she just puts her head down and does her job. No outside help, no supermassive intellect, no inflated ego. She's just a police sergeant who's been doing the job for a long time. And the show
Are you sure this is a show that's on television?
I know. It's pretty unbelievable because not only that, but, like, no offense to anybody in this show, there's no one pretty on it. All of these people look like real life, everyday people, suburban people. It takes place in sort of a smaller town.
Who wants to look at that?
I mean, the only one that wants to look at it is me because normal looking is the new beautiful as far as I'm concerned. I've been inundated with enough beauty. So yeah, a great show, Happy Valley. It's funny. It's also super dark. The lead, the character of Catherine, is such a phenomenal performance by this actress. And you know how I was worried last week? I was talking about how I watched Girls. And I was worried that I was a misogynist because I liked all the male characters in a show called Girls. Well, this brought me back. This convinced me I'm not a misogynist, because the female characters on this show are the best.
I think the jury's still out on that.
Well, I think the thing is it's got to be British people that cure me of my ails. Like John Oliver cured me of my political apathy. Idris Elba cured me of my racism. Benedict Cumberbatch cured me of my heterosexuality. So as long as it's a British person, they can bring out the real progressive in me. So Happy Valley, check it out.
So how many seasons have there been of Happy
So
Valley?
it's the second one right now.
Oh, is it currently airing?
Mm-hmm, correct. It's currently airing on BBC.
Okay.
But you can check out the first season on Netflix, and hopefully the second season will be up there soon once they wrap it all up. But
okay, very cool. The show that I wanted to recommend to people is called The Nick. It is not about Patrick Ewing. I know you were thinking that it was going to cover the 90s New York Knickerbockers teams, but unfortunately no. But no, this is a show which you may have heard a little bit about.
That's exactly how much I've heard about it.
Yeah, just
a little bit.
The reason I think it's under the radar is that it's on Cinemax. And so if this show was on HBO, I think everyone would be talking about it. And it's directed by Steven Soderbergh. He actually directs every single episode. And He shoots it himself. He's his own cinematographer on these things. I think he might even edit it. I can't remember. But anyway, he's heavily involved. He does not write the episodes. There are two guys that are the head writers of the show. But anyway, it's got Clive Owen as the star, and there are, several other really good actors in it. The I don't know, co-star, I guess we'd say, is Andre Holland, who's tremendous in this. Anyway, basically the world of it is set in turn of the century, like literally like I think it starts in 1900. In New York, and this hospital that is called the Nick, and it follows basically, in some ways, it follows the beats of a traditional hospital drama show. But the thing about this show is that it is the most cinematic show on television. The way that it's shot, the camera is so inventive, is so interesting. Like almost every single shot in this show is just, like, you can tell a tremendous amount of thought went into it. There's almost no throwaways. The acting is top shelf. The writing's very good. So it's like, yeah, I mean, if you just say, oh well, it's doctors, a doctor who kind of plays by his own rules, and you're like, oh, so it's like 1900 House or something or whatever.
Right.
There's so many things you could say, or the bunch of the shows I've already seen. But it really separates itself from that in the execution, just like many things. It's all about the execution. I mean, there's only so many formulas and so many types of shows you can do, and like you said, there's all these procedurals, and how many shows are there about cops and spies, and whatever. But if you do it right, and you do it in a new way or an innovative way, then you can really elevate that material, and that's what this show does. It elevates the material to another level. Like I said, that the acting, the writing, and particularly the way that it's shot and lit, I mean, just looks like nothing else on television. So if you're a fan of cinematic filmmaking, then you owe it yourself to check this show out.
Would you compare it to any of Soderbergh's other work? Is it very clearly his thumbprint? Because that guy actually, if I recall correctly, jumps around a lot.
Yeah.
Like, he plays around a lot. So is this completely new territory for him?
I wouldn't say it's completely new. I mean, you definitely have some of the hallmarks of other Soderbergh stuff, but it's its own thing. I mean, I think that's one of the things that's nice about him, is that when he goes, whatever movie he's doing, whether it's something, big budget like the Ocean's movies, or some little small thing, or trying to do something really rough, cinema verite kind of thing like Traffic or whatever, he figures out what the look and feel for that thing is, and he does that. And so this has its own look and feel that, while you can see some of the other Soderbergh movies influencing it, it's not like, oh well, he's just doing Traffic but set in,
right. He's not taking the Scorsese with vinyl route.
Right, exactly. Right. Yeah, okay, no, it feels much fresher than that. So anyway,
so where can I check it out?
Well, Cinemax.
Okay, perfect.
HBO actually has the first season now. It's on HBO Go, whatever, so you can check that out.
Right.
If you have that. The second season, I think, just wrapped maybe a month, or just finished airing a month or two ago. So, and I think the way the deal is, Cinemax is actually owned by HBO. So, but however it works, the things don't come out for another 9 months or something after they air on Cinemax. So, or at least that's the deal with this particular show. So so if you have HBO, you can check it out there. Obviously, I'm sure you can find it on all the different streaming services like Amazon or iTunes, whatever, where you can buy episodes a la carte. And I don't know, I've heard there's other ways to find episodes.
I wouldn't know.
I don't know anything about that either, but rumors.
Everything I do completely above board.
From the dark internet, or the dark web. What do they call it?
The deep
web.
The deep dark interwebs.
So, all right. So that's a little bit.
So that's pretty interesting. We got some recommendations.
Yeah, one of the things I did want to circle back just to close the loop here on Saul. One of the things we talked about with both those shows we recommended was just how they're executed in a way to set them apart. And that's something that I was noticing when I was watching Saul and catching up on these episodes.
Yeah, because it's another show about a lawyer.
Right. Yeah.
It's another show about a lawyer and a cop.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but even down to the most minute details, it's incredible how much execution can change. So the thing that really struck me was, so the scene that I'm thinking of in particular is when Jimmy has set up the television commercial, and he's done this kind of behind the backs of the partners, but he's in his office and he's waiting to see if anyone's going to call, if the commercial is going to be effective at all. And, he's got it set up so it'll roll over all the lines. And he's just sitting there staring at the phone, waiting for it to ring. And I'm like, this is pretty incredible that these guys can create this much excitement watching a phone ring.
Yeah. The last time I was that excited about a phone ringing was a few minutes earlier on the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't quite as exciting as that, but still very exciting.
My heart was a little aflutter.
Yeah.
That's the Pod Couple, brought to you by randomly ringing phones, occasional traffic driving by, and every once in a while a battery dying. The Pod Couple, we clearly don't think we're better than you.
And we are demonstrating it. You too can have a podcast. It really is not that hard, apparently. Or doesn't really take any real competence at all. But yeah, so anyway, so that was that. And another scene that was similar in the way that you would think it would be very boring on the page was the scene where they're having the first meeting and they're talking about client outreach and all that stuff. And there's all these other things going on, all this stuff under the surface. And it's this incredibly tense, interesting scene, this tension between Jimmy and Chuck and what's going on with Kim. And so I'm just sitting there going, this is a boring meeting, but I'm riveted to the screen.
Yeah, the most exciting boring meeting you've seen in quite some time.
So to be able to take things like a phone ringing, like a boring client discussion meeting, and turn those into really interesting, captivating scenes is something that I think speaks to how well this show is done.
Yeah. Speaking of well done shows and maybe conversely not very well done shows, maybe we should talk some politics.
I think that sounds like a segue that I can follow. Barely, but still. Hey, they're not all going to work, all right?
No, man.
We're doing our best here. So, yeah, politics is... let's see what's going on now. We just wrapped what they call Super Tuesday 2, Mini Tuesday or whatever. So when we last spoke, it was actually right before Super Tuesday, which happened on the 1st. So quite a few states have voted since then, and things have not really changed tremendously from what we saw before. I mean, there have been a few surprises, like Cruz winning Maine, although that was largely attributed to very small turnout, and a caucus state, which the caucus states are places where a strong ground game gives you a big advantage, and that's one of Cruz's strengths. So it's not totally surprising. I don't think it reflects that he's got some newfound strength in the Northeast by any means.
No, it's just a case of like old school politicking kind of paying off in that instance.
Right. And of course there were very few delegates at stake, so it didn't change the dynamic of the race very much. Trump has won a bunch of states and is still holding a fairly commanding lead there. I mean, Cruz is within striking distance, but the problem for Cruz is that the states where he is the strongest are the very conservative states with a lot of evangelicals. Almost all the states have already voted. So it's hard to imagine him doing better than he's already done, and he's already losing. In fact, he's lost a lot of those evangelical heavy states to Trump. So it's kind of like, if he can't win those, if he can't beat Trump in those states or in all of them, I mean, he's beaten him in some, but they've pretty much split those, then he's in trouble because Trump is beating him pretty much everywhere else, and the rest of the map looks much more Trump friendly than Cruz friendly. So that's I don't see much changing there.
No, don't worry, everybody. We're still completely off the rails, politically speaking. So
yeah,
whew, breathe a sigh of relief.
Yeah, I mean, no chance of getting back to a totally acceptable politician like Ted Cruz. Nobody reasonable like that. That's the funniest thing, is to watch the Republican establishment getting so desperate that they're starting to rally behind Ted Cruz and going like, well, I mean, he's not Trump, I guess. I mean, we literally just said a week ago that if he was murdered on the Senate floor and a trial was held in the Senate, nobody would convict the murderer. But I guess.
Strange bedfellows, man, for sure.
It's yeah. So it's now pretty much a battle to the death between the most hated man in the Republican Party and the second most hated man in the Republican Party, and I don't think the party leaders even know which person that is. And when I say the party, I really mean the party leaders, because clearly the actual voters like both of these guys. For what reasons, I do not know, but they do.
I think it's probably all of the talk about dick size. You know?
Yeah.
That's what I want. It's very presidential.
Yeah.
Who knew that we were going to talk about Trump's dick size on a podcast, and then he would maybe hear our podcast.
That's true.
And 3 days later, I can adopt this strategy.
That's true. Yeah, I did actually make a joke in the last podcast about him having a small dick, and then he immediately defended his dick size. So I think it's pretty clear that this podcast is widely listened to in the Trump camp, as evidenced by that.
Yeah, it's just all Trump supporters that listen to us, and Trump himself. The biggest Trump supporter of them all, just walking around high on self-tanning fumes. Like Clive Owen and the Nick.
You said you hadn't watched it.
I hadn't, but I'm pretty sure Obama talked about it.
Yeah, so anyway, that's the Republican side. I mean, otherwise, you know, the only other news of any note, I think, is that Marco Rubio continues to nosedive and do worse with almost every passing primary. So his campaign is more or less already moribund, and it's just a matter of somebody actually calling the time of death. And I expect that call to happen on March 15th when he loses his home state of Florida. So we'll see. Otherwise, you know, on the Democratic side, Bernie Sanders has won several primaries since we last talked, more than Hillary Clinton, including just yesterday winning Michigan, which was considered a huge upset because he was down quite a bit in the polls.
21 points.
So yeah, so that's
a massive cock up.
Yeah, and this is a situation where obviously, as you might expect, this is being spun as this incredible victory for him, and you know, his biggest win of the entire campaigns thus far, and all that is true, but it's also, I think, instructive to. It's indicative of the problem with his whole campaign, which is that on a night in which he had his biggest win of the entire campaign season, he fell 20 delegates further behind Hillary Clinton because in Michigan it was very close. So while he won Michigan, he actually only came out with like 6 more delegates than her. Whereas in Mississippi, the other state which was voting yesterday, she crushed him, as she has in every other southern state, and got like 20 extra delegates, or whatever the number was. I think the totals for the night was like 96 to 76 in favor of Clinton. So that's why Bernie has a really tough road to hoe going forward, because even when he gets big wins, they're not big enough to make the difference and to make up the delegate deficit that he's currently facing, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 plus. Actually, I think it's maybe closer to 250 now. So anyway, you know, the other thing, it's like not to rain on the Sanders supporters parade.
No, keep it coming, buddy.
But I think, you know, with Michigan, there's a couple things that we can look at that I think are also instructive of as to his campaign and the kind of places he can win and the kind of places he's competitive. You know, Michigan didn't necessarily fit into the lily white narrative that he's won all these other states that are just heavily white, liberal, smaller states. Michigan doesn't quite fit into that pattern. But I think one of the things you can look at from the exit polling that happened in Michigan is that Hillary Clinton actually won fairly substantially among registered Democrats. But Michigan's an open primary where independents can vote too, and that's what made the difference here. A lot of independents showed up and they voted for Bernie Sanders, and that's what gave him the edge. So, and again, looking down the calendar here, Florida is a closed primary. Ohio is semi-open, so it's going to be tougher for him to win in those places without that independent vote coming in on his side, and so that's one other thing that made a difference in Michigan for sure. The other thing is, Sanders supporters probably get excited and say, well, look, he was down by this huge amount in the polls and he won, so that shows that the polls don't really mean anything and he can win. And of course polls can be wrong, but there is sort of a specific reason why the polls were so far off in Michigan, one of the reasons anyway is that the way they calibrate these polls is based on the previous election. That's how they try to figure out what the electorate's going to look like. And so the previous primary election that was in Michigan was Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. But Barack Obama hadn't actually, he missed the filing deadline to be an official candidate. So he wasn't actually on the ballot in Michigan. And therefore, it was basically a meaningless primary, and it had a very low turnout as a result of it because Clinton was already a foregone conclusion as far as winning. So therefore, the electorate looked very different in 2008 than it did here in 2016 with an actual competitive primary, and that's one of the reasons why those numbers were not calibrated correctly. I don't think that we're going to see a lot of 20-point swings.
No, it's fairly unprecedented,
right
across the board. It's just not something that happens. What's interesting to me is that get home last night, open up Reddit, and suddenly within 2 hours, the first 6 stories are all Sanders, huge upset, Sanders. And of course, you look at the comments and they're all saying, the polls don't matter. And then I get on Reddit today and there's new poll, 33% of Sanders supporters won't vote for Hillary Clinton, if he doesn't get the nomination. And we spent a ton of time talking about how polls weren't important, and then we're like, see, but look at this poll. This poll right here says that Sanders is the only one that can beat Trump because his supporters won't vote for Clinton. And it's funny how we just use the closest weapon at hand to desperately fight for whatever side we deem right.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of politics in a nutshell. I think that I don't want to take anything away from it. It's a huge win for him, and definitely certainly can give him some momentum and maybe make a few people think a little more seriously about him.
You still think at this point it's good for him to stay in just to keep Clinton left of center?
I do. I think that, despite, the conventional wisdom is that a candidate, you want to settle on a candidate quickly so that they don't get too bruised in the primary process, and so that they can kind of pivot to the general and focus their intention and their money there. And I'm sure there's some value to that. But on the other hand, I think that there's also a lot of value to a candidate being, battle tested. And Clinton might not need battle testing as much as some other candidates, but she still, needs to stay sharp. And she's not necessarily a great campaigner. I think that's one of her weaknesses. And so to have more experience debating, to have more experience campaigning is good. And it's also a situation where, the kind of the way the campaign has been, this primary between these two candidates, it's not as if she's getting beat up in the way that the Republican candidates are getting beat up. I mean, I haven't seen any dick measuring contests between Bernie and Hillary, so it's very much on the issues. It's very substantial. There's the attacks, just the level of discourse is so different when you look from the Republican race to the Democratic race. It's really the difference between, middle school, schoolyard,
shit-flinging contests,
and mature adults having a reasonable disagreement. So anyway, I think that's all. So I don't think any of those things are really going to hurt her too much in the general. I mean, the only thing that would hurt is if indeed Bernie supporters become so butthurt, especially if it's a long primary and they keep holding out hope because he keeps winning just enough places like Michigan to keep the hope alive, that they become embittered and choose not to vote for her. But I mean,
Do you think at that point, though, they just opt out of voting entirely? Or do you think there's a danger that they would then go over to the Trump side?
I don't know. I mean, if they do that, then they really, I mean,
they will lose all your respect.
Yeah, and
we will all lose our homes.
So listen, Sanders supporters, if you want to have my respect, you better not vote for Donald Trump. Yeah, it's hard for me to believe that they would do that. I mean, are they really that vindictive against themselves?
I don't know, man. If it's like a lot of millennials, maybe.
Maybe, but I mean,
young people are impetuous.
I mean, millennials don't vote that much anyway, so
that's true.
So I'm not overly worried about that. But yeah, I mean, it's just silly. I mean, it's like, come on, grow up, stop being a baby. Like Hillary Clinton is, whether you like her or you don't like her, she's a gazillion times better than Donald Trump or Ted Cruz or anyone else who could possibly win the nomination on the Republican side. And her views are not that different from Bernie Sanders, whatever you believe. So line up behind her and vote for her if she gets the nomination. No other response is acceptable in my view.
So, okay. Not to put too fine a point on it.
No.
But stop being babies. You fucking babies.
Yeah. Now speaking of thin-skinned babies, I think we're going to have to talk about Donald Trump again. I know he doesn't get enough attention with this race. He's really barely been covered.
Donald Humph?
Yeah. So he's this guy. He's like a billionaire. And
Donald Trump?
Is this? Yeah, he has really bright orange skin and bad hair.
Oh, and that guy, the sponge.
Yeah, and he's actually winning the Republican race right now. But no, so I think that the thing I wanted to talk about with him, and this is a bit of a hot take, so get ready, get ready to get burned, Steve. So I want to get your reaction to it, and I'll start right off the top saying that, I think Donald Trump is a repulsive bully, a blowhard, really just an all-around pile of garbage. I think that the prospect of him becoming president is terrifying. I would say that there's a 99% chance that he will be an unmitigated disaster as president.
Fire!
So, that said, that out of the way, there's a scene in Wes Anderson's film, The
Life Aquatic?
No, this is terrible. I'm blanking on the film. What kind of... Yeah, I guess we
Rushmore?
Maybe we need to do a Wes Anderson series after this so we can continue with our only Anderson's director series.
Yeah, only Anderson's. See if Anthony Anderson ever directs anything.
The Royal Tenenbaums is the film I'm thinking of, or that I'm belatedly thinking of here. Anyway, there's a scene in The Royal Tenenbaums. One of my favorite scenes in the movie, a line that always cracks me up, where Owen Wilson is playing this writer, and he's on the phone, I think, giving an interview, and he says, the thing that everyone knows about General Custer is that he was killed at Little Bighorn. So I ask, what if he wasn't?
Yeah. What this book presupposes.
Yeah. You remember the line better than I do. So
that's a great line, man.
So anyway, along those lines, what everyone knows is that Donald Trump would be the worst president. So what I'm asking is, what if he wouldn't? And here's sort of the case for it, as far as I can see. Note that I think that he will be terrible. But the only chance I think that he wouldn't be terrible is the fact that I don't think this is a guy who has any strong convictions. I don't think he has a lot. He doesn't really pay attention to the details of policy or, know much about the government or how it functions or any of this stuff. So, nor does he seem to have any real interest in it. So therefore, if he was to become president... Hold on, I have to take a minute to recover from the...
Oh, it's a burn!
So if he was to become president, he's the type of guy who, from what I've seen, the way he talks, he seems to put a lot of stock in resumes. He's like, oh, I'm going to find the best this, we'll find the best construction company and whatever, the smartest guy. And a lot of it is, based on resumes. People who have these really high degrees or have accomplished something in their fields. He seems to have a lot of respect for that. So who are the kind of people he'd reach out to fill his administration and do the actual work that he doesn't want to do or care about, basically take care of all the details? I'm assuming it would be political professionals who have those kinds of resumes. And so if those political professionals are, the serious kind of detail-oriented people that tend to find those jobs, then I could see his administration really not being that different in action from a typical, moderate Republican administration.
Well, does this get to a slightly different point of how much power does the president really have?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does. It speaks to that to some degree. I mean, I do think the president. I mean, obviously, the president has a tremendous amount of power, but he also has tremendous limitations and checks put on that power, particularly in the domestic arena. Now, obviously, it's very frightening to think of Trump as the face of America to the rest of the world. Also completely embarrassing to think about. But, there have been, I mean, Russia's a pretty big country with a lot of nukes and a military, and Vladimir Putin's a pretty weird guy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Italy...
That's Trump's first day in office, just painting of him on a horse shirtless.
Right.
He's like, I'll show him how to sit on the most beautiful, luxuriant horse. Women love me on a horse.
My giant hands on the reins. Almost had a spit take there.
That's good, man.
So
I do want to spit a lot when we talk about Trump, that's for sure.
So I mean, there have been other, first world countries like Italy had Silvio Berlusconi, who was kind of a clown, and could we survive?
Germany had Hitler.
Germany had Hitler. Italy also had Mussolini.
People recover from things.
Right. Yeah, Germany's doing very well right now. They're doing very well. So look, I'm not saying it's going to be good. I'm not saying there's even a very good chance of it being good. But here's what the question comes down to: would you rather have someone like Trump, who is potentially is malleable because if he doesn't have any strong opinions, he doesn't have these hardened convictions. I mean, as the other Republicans have pointed out, he was registered as a Democrat for many years. That he could fill his administration with basically serious professionals who understand how government works and are reasonable about making compromises or whatever, and put forth an agenda that's not completely hard right insane. Or would you rather have someone like Ted Cruz, who we know exactly where he stands, who we know is going to be completely uncompromising, hard right on every single issue, and is going to use every bit of his power to push that agenda and push the country as far right as he possibly can from the office of the president. So
yeah, I mean, a Trump presidency certainly frightens me, but a Cruz presidency is truly terrifying. It really is, for specifically those reasons. I think that those are fine points. And one of the things with Trump is that you do hope that he will, if either by luck or some skill set that he has heretofore not displayed, pick people that would do a very good job if he's following this resume-based hiring process. And you would hope that's
really
the case.
good. He had a whole show where he just hired people. So
yeah, well, but that show was mostly him firing people. So he just shows up to the White House and starts firing everybody from the interns up. Oh man, that's the thing. That's the thing that is scary about the idea of a Trump presidency is what if he picks all the wrong people?
Right, exactly. And I think certainly there's a strong probability that could happen. I think in some ways I would actually compare it, and this is not favorably, to the George W. Bush administration, where I think Bush was a guy again who was not terribly interested in the details of policy. Not the brightest political mind we've ever had in the Oval Office by any means, and he one of the reasons he brought in Dick Cheney and put him on the ticket was because he wanted a veteran politician who could really sort of be his mentor and direct him on the way to go. And unfortunately, Dick Cheney directed him directly into the arms of the neocons, and that whole movement, which turned out to be disastrous. So certainly, could something like that happen with Trump? Could the first couple people he picks be, the neocons of 2016 or what some version of that, and then just fill?
Yeah, the good news is you don't have Cruz as a president. The bad news is you now have Cruz as a vice president and Trump as a president. Right. Oh no!
And Cruz is setting the agenda. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's what it's obviously going to come down to that, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't trust Donald Trump to hire the right people, but I feel like it's at least possible he could do it even by accidentally. Whereas with Cruz,
accidentally ushers us into a golden age.
Yeah. I don't know if I call it golden age.
An orange age.
An orange age, yes. Definitely an orange age. But, I'm still saying, like, ceiling is, like, moderate Republican, sort of Mitt Romney-esque administration. That's the ceiling. Right. Which is not great, but not as disastrous as what you might otherwise imagine from Donald Trump. I mean, again, it's not like Donald Trump is going to be making all these, he's not going to be in there getting deep into the weeds of policy and drafting legislation or anything. I mean, let's face it, like he's gonna say.
And when someone's that egomaniacal, you have to assume that to some extent, as his popularity wanes once he gets into office, he would actually change. He would try to go with the crowd, try to give the people to an extent something that they wanted, because the approval means so much to him.
Yeah, that's true. And also, I mean, this guy, he's shown the ability to change his position on a dime, like, all the time, and just justify it with whatever means. I mean, how hard would it at all to imagine him getting in office and then saying, "Oh yeah, so about that wall, yeah, we looked into it. It's not going to work, so we're not doing that anyway." Moving on. So. That's not something that I think is far-fetched at all. I think he could easily say, "Yeah, we had our best people look at it, and we can't build it, so we're not gonna put that on the American people. It's not good for business. Whatever the bullshit comes out of his mouth is.
Always not good for business.
Right.
That's a great final line for anything he wants to do.
So anyway, all right.
So what you're saying is that you urge all of the Republicans out there who are definitely voting Republican one way or the other to go ahead and vote for Donald Trump.
Yeah, I will be, definitely. I fully support and endorse Donald Trump on this podcast. That's what I wanted to get to as the final takeaway here.
As for me, I'm a Ben Carson man. So feel free to put all of your votes towards Ben Carson.
Yeah, let's draft Ben Carson back into the race.
Oh, Kyle. They're not supposed to know he's out of the race.
Oh, whoops. Did I ruin that? Sorry, I ruined your devious plan. I actually did want Ben Carson to win the nomination because I just really would have enjoyed Carson running in the general.
It's definitely he's like walking, human, living, breathing Ambien. So it's very relaxing to watch him whenever he's on television. Doesn't stress me out as much as these other maniacs.
He had all the craziness of Trump with none of the charisma.
I know.
So anyway, I feel like any Democratic candidate would have won 50 states going against Ben Carson. Alas, it is not to be.
Well,
and alas, I think we have to end this political segment as well.
Yeah, that's it for that.
Move on to the next film in our director's series, Paul Thomas Anderson's
Punch Drunk Love. I thought you were going to come in with the love. No love.
No love for Punch Drunk Love. That's something that may crop up here. No, I wouldn't say I have no love for it, but this is a film that, obviously it followed Boogie Nights and Magnolia, and Paul Thomas Anderson certainly had set himself up as a director of a certain type of movie after doing those epic films.
Yeah, did sprawling stories, intertwining narratives.
Exactly. And so, in fact, after he had finished Magnolia, I don't know, some magazine or something asked him, what's your next project? And he said, I'd like to do a 90-minute Adam Sandler film. and everybody thought it was a joke
Yeah.
until he started making Punch Drunk Love, and they're like, oh, he was serious about that. And so then the film came out, and I think was widely seen as a disappointment to both Paul Thomas Anderson fans and Adam Sandler fans.
Certainly for Sandler fans.
So not really, didn't really fit into what we'd seen.
That was legitimately one of those movies that your parents who might, love Adam Sandler would walk into thinking they're getting an Adam Sandler movie only to be super confused.
Exactly.
Right out off the bat. That's great.
And I imagine, Adam Sandler at the time this movie was made was riding pretty high. I mean, he's still obviously a big star, but at that time he was incredibly bankable when this movie came out. And, there was an expectation of what an Adam Sandler movie is. And I'm sure because the studio always wants to make money on a movie, I imagine they marketed this as a typical Adam Sandler movie. I don't remember what the ad campaign was.
Yeah, it was like just him dancing in the grocery store aisle.
Right.
Scene, it was like the whole commercial for the film.
Yeah. So anyway, so needless to say, people were not expecting what they got with this film. And that's one of the things that I feel like runs throughout this whole film. I feel like this film is all about subverting expectations. I mean, very much in a meta sense, and that it's something very different than we'd seen from either of these two people, from Anderson or Sandler previously. But then even the way a lot of the scenes play out, and we can talk about that a little later. But I wanted to hear your opinion on it, because I think that we're going to be a little bit split on this film, which is nice, because up until this point, we've been 100% in agreement, and I mean, as fun as mutual masturbation is, as we learned last week.
Mm-hmm. No, we learned so hard.
So hard. Yeah, sometimes you wanna have a little friendly disagreement, much like Hillary and Bernie. So let's hear what you have to say about this.
Well, this is my favorite Paul Thomas Anderson movie.
Strong statement.
That is a strong statement, and I love it. I just love the idea of Anderson, although I like very much, Magnolia, I like very much Boogie Nights. These are great films, absolutely. But for my money, this is pound for pound his best work. It's the most enjoyable, the most rewatchable, and I love when he just hammers down on this one character, and he's able to flesh him out completely, which, I mean, he's great at fleshing out multiple characters, but it still does take a lot of time, and it still does take a lot of energy. And this movie, to me, like, watching this movie is effortless. I love it. And it is still imbued with a ton of energy itself. Like, just because this is a 90-minute romantic comedy Adam Sandler type of movie doesn't mean that he's sleeping on all his, like, camera techniques and setting up scenes. And one thing that I really noticed watching it, and I've seen this, this is probably my most viewed Paul Thomas Anderson movie too. But one thing that I noticed watching it this time around was how effectively, and he's done such a great job up to this point in using the music to convey mood, but he really hits it out of the park.
Oh, yeah.
The music in this movie is phenomenal to really give you the idea of not just the actual love, the sweeping, lazy grandeur of true romantic love, but also to show you, like, the crazy amount of anxiety that's going on in Adam Sandler's character's head, like, at all times.
Yeah, that like percussive, driving, sort of weird electronic music that pervades most of the scenes in which Sandler is so uncomfortable in his own skin, is just delivers a level of tension to those scenes that you can. I mean, if you drop that soundtrack, the scenes would play completely different.
Yeah, if you drop the soundtrack, this movie's no longer my favorite Paul Thomas Anderson movie, probably.
Right. Yeah, if you can imagine it being done with a more traditional score, and it would take away huge layers to the movie.
Yeah.
So
what's your take on it, Kyle?
Well,
you don't love it as much as I do.
I do not. I think saying it's well, I mean, you can say it's your favorite Paul Thomas Anderson movie. I can't argue with that. It's a subjective opinion. Saying it's the best Paul Thomas Anderson movie, I think, is just objectively wrong. But
all right.
But no. Yeah, I mean, as far as it goes,
fire.
Just spitting fireballs all day on this one. Yeah, I think that For me, the movie has a lot of interest. I mean, Paul Thomas Anderson is obviously a very interesting filmmaker. That's why we chose him. We really like him. And so there's no question that there are great scenes in this film. There are great moments in this film. But it doesn't all hang together for me. And I was thinking about why. And I think that maybe the biggest reason why is that it's a romantic comedy at its core. I mean, that's basically what this story is. But the character, Emily Watson's character in this film, is a cipher. She's really not developed in any way, and it's hard for me to have a romantic comedy work where only one character is developed. There's no, from what we know of her, and we know very little from this film, she seems like a person with her head screwed on, right? Seems like a person who is relatively together, attractive person. And yet she is inexplicably attracted to the Sandler character, who's a complete mess. And that's not to say that people who have their shit together can't be attracted to people who are messes, because obviously that happens in the real world. But there's usually a reason.
Thankfully.
Yeah. I mean, we wouldn't have anybody. There's got to be. But yeah, I mean, but there's usually some underlying reason for that, and we're never introduced to that reason, or even it's never even really hinted at that I can see. And so for me, it's like I the whole time just going, what is she seeing this guy? Why is she into this guy? It just feels like she's there to service the plot, not as a fully fleshed out character, which is so weird for Thomas Anderson, because he's so, like I said, he's so good at efficiently developing these characters. We've seen him do it over and over again with these other movies, where within 30 seconds into a scene, or which just showing doing one little 1 minute quick scene with just even with sometimes with a camera move or a push in, a dolly in on somebody, he's able to establish all this information and tell us something deep about that person's soul. And so it's strange to me it doesn't happen in this. And maybe I just missed it. Maybe I didn't pick up on what he was trying to do there. This is my second time through this film. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I do. That's actually something I did notice this time around, too, because I was thinking, like, I for sure am going to say this is my favorite PTA movie, because I already know that it is. And I'm guessing that Kyle is not going to be in that camp. So I was like, if I'm watching this through Kyle's eyes, what's the big flaw here? And I do think that it is her character to a degree. I feel like there's enough weight behind my sympathies for Sandler that I get why she is the focus and intensity of his desire. And the fact that she seems to be just willing to go along for the ride is like good enough for me. I will admit that it's one of the weaker points of the movie, but it's not nearly enough to sour the viewing experience for me as a whole. Because I do feel like it's sort of this idea of destiny, or two star-crossed lovers being pushed together, and he does enough there, I think, cinematically to kind of reinforce that idea that it works for me. It doesn't take the movie down any notches. Plus, British, and I just love the British.
Oh yeah, we already established that.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what did it for you. Maybe you're like, I don't care how much character development.
Oh Christ! What if she's Australian?
Oh no. Well, but that would be good for us too, because
British colonial.
Yeah.
That still works.
And you know how much the Australians love this podcast.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
So really, it's good anyway. You slice it, but yeah. We talked. Like I said, I talked about how it subverts expectations, and I really think that starts in the very first shot of the movie. Anderson, throughout these other films, has really established his trademark as moving the camera.
Mm-hmm.
We have all this incredible energy, and how does this film start? A static shot.
Yeah,
a long static shot of Adam Sandler on the phone with basically this Spartan background, this metal desk in a with the plain brick wall behind
blue
him.
As can be.
Right. So right off the bat, I think he's telling. I mean, I feel like he's telling us in his opening shot, this is not going to be the typical PTA movie you've come to know and love. So be warned.
Yeah.
Another thing that I think was another exercise in subverting expectations, and this is actually one of my favorite parts of the film, is when they have the chase scene. and Sandler is running away from these. I guess they're supposed to be Mormons. They never specifically establish it, but they're these white blonde guys from Provo, Utah. So anyway, that are beating him up or basically trying to shake him down for money, and he's running and it's kind of this sort of playing up to be like an epic chase scene. He's dodging down alleys and all this stuff, and then it ends with him running on the street and the car pulling up alongside him, and the guy's going, "Where the fuck are you going? We know where you live." Or where? And so it's like, again, it's like this is
he takes that flying leap into the air. Right. And then just ends up running beside the truck.
Right. And this is the payoff to this. You expect the end of it to be like he's going to escape in a dramatic fashion or they're going to catch him in a dramatic fashion. But then instead, the whole thing ends with just this silly moment of what has been built up to be not that kind of scene. I mean, we've seen chase scenes a million times, and that's not how they end. And so I did like that very much. But ultimately, the way that the romance plays out, I think, also fits into that idea. It's not your typical romantic comedy. The way that the things happen, the relationship between them, the way that they talk to each other, it's all not what you have come to expect. And I appreciate that very much, because it's like, I don't need to see another formulaic romantic comedy. And those are some of the things that I liked about it. Let's talk about Sandler's performance, because this is a very different Adam Sandler than I think we've probably seen in any other movie.
Yeah, I mean, you could make the case for him as a dramatic actor in something like Reign Over Me. But even there, this is such an interesting, going back to your idea of subversion, this is such an interesting subversion, almost like a parody of an Adam Sandler character. Like, got the rage, the sort of wackiness is there, but it's much darker.
Yeah. And it's buried much deeper.
Yeah.
It's kind of barely restrained, but it's, and I think that, one of the things you talked about, some of his other dramatic roles, which he's had before, but I feel like the problem with Sandler is it's like he does his normal Sandler thing, which is the goofy comedy shtick, and then he does the drama stuff, but it's almost always just veers into this mawkish sentimentality, and so somehow Anderson was able to split the difference and capture that dramatic elements that's in his acting that are present, but stop it from becoming in any way saccharine or sentimental stuff, and yet keep some of the comedy too, but channel it in a very dark PTA way.
Yeah, for sure. The comedy is super dark once again.
Yeah, which we've seen, and that's one of the things you took away from.
Just like a man crying. It's like hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things you took away from the first three films we talked about last week was the dark humor that runs through these, and this film is maybe the most strident example of that.
Yeah, because it's definitely the funniest.
I think that Sandler, one of the things that's so interesting is his physicality in this movie and the way that he literally feels like a man trying to crawl out of his own skin. And he's always got that nervous energy. He's shuffling his feet.
Yeah, he can never quite get comfortable.
Right. And even the way he kind of sidles out of a room, there's the great scene where he's just kind of backing up out of his office and that with his shoulders shifting in that almost serpentine pattern, and it's very odd, but it works, and it tells you more about the character than almost any other thing that he does. So that's something I enjoyed.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, man. Like, what is Anderson? He just seems to really get a thrill from putting actors, in these different kinds of roles. He wrote this part specifically for Sandler. Apparently they were friends before, the movie got made. So it's just really neat to see him have such a deftness with handling these guys. You know, it wouldn't have worked. You can't switch out Mark Wahlberg for Sandler in this movie. You can't put Sandler back in Wahlberg's role in Boogie Nights. Like those, you can use all of this recurring cast of characters, of which he uses way less here.
Yeah,
but
that's another subverting expectations thing I noted, was how few people we see from the PTA stable. I mean, really, it's just
Hoffman and Guzman.
Yeah, right. Who are both in pretty small roles. Guzman in particular, almost a throwaway role.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of strange. Like he didn't even really use him in what I feel like is a Guzman way, you know? Right. And I was like, why even bother having him? You could have just thrown any actor in that role. But I don't know. I mean, again, that may have been part of him just saying, like, hey, you know, I'm going to make a different kind of movie, and that means you're not going to get Luis Guzman being funny.
Yeah, maybe it's a misdirection.
Right. And I mean, and to be fair, he still has some funny reaction shots, but they're very subdued compared to what we're accustomed to seeing from him comedically. So I don't know. I don't know what the plan was there. So
where do you rank this? Obviously, not your favorite PTA movie so far, but of what we've seen going back through this. You know what I would also like to take a moment to say is that I think that part of the reason I love this movie so much is in going back and watching all of these films, I feel like this was the perfect time to take this break. You know, because he had handed me something that was... So he hands us Boogie Nights, which is fantastic, and then Magnolia, which is sort of trying to, you know, do a lot of the same things that Boogie Nights did, but even more so, you know, more ambitious. And if you had given me something with, like, more narrative threads, if you'd given me, like, a 3.5-hour movie, you know, following more people around, then I probably would have been really taxed. But this is a very welcome break. It's almost like when you're, you know, building a rock and roll album and you throw in, like, that nice love song, you know, 4 tracks deep, so that you don't wear out all your energy at the, you know, up front. So
that's what I do when I'm building a rock album.
Yeah, which you've done many. Would you say rock album or just rock collection?
Oh, what, we were talking about music?
Geodes.
Yeah, I don't know anything about music, as we've established on this.
Don't worry, we'll get to that.
But yeah, so I think you know, something else. With this film, oh, you do. I guess I should answer your question maybe instead of just moving on to my own.
Well, or whatever.
Material. Yeah, I don't acknowledge the validity of your question.
I just wanted to pretend like we were having a dialogue. We're not even in the same room.
Yeah, we just.
This is Postal Service. Kyle records all of his parts, and then I go in and record some of my parts.
We don't want this to really feel like a conversation. Nobody wants that. People just rather hear someone pontificate.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, as far as my answer to your question, I would actually place this last among the Anderson movies for me that we've seen so far anyway. Yeah, like it just doesn't work as a whole movie. The other 3 all work as whole movies, and I think Boogie Nights and Magnolia are just on a completely different plane for me. Those are like near masterpieces, if not masterpieces. Whereas, you know, and Hard 8 is a very good movie. This movie is an interesting movie that doesn't totally work for me.
Yeah, I get it.
So, yeah, but again, definitely worth seeing. It's not a movie that I would say...
Yeah, the worst Paul Thomas Anderson movie you should go watch immediately, basically.
Exactly. And again, if you just want to see something that's different, you want to see something that's different from the typical romantic comedy, from the typical Adam Sandler movie.
And certainly there are, it seems universally, people that may agree with Kyle and think that the movie doesn't work as a whole, but Sandler's performance essentially universally praised.
Yeah, and rightly so. You know, the one of the plot points in this movie involves this convoluted scheme by Sandler to cash in basically box tops from pudding in order to collect an incredible wealth of frequent flyer miles through some you know, misprint in a promotion or some loophole in this promotion by American Airlines and you know, Foster Foods or whatever it is. Did you know that's like a real thing? That was based on a real thing? Okay.
That's crazy, right?
That was one of the most interesting things about the movie to me when I read that the first time I saw the movie, and I think I read some stuff online about it, and I came across that.
That's one of those
and
great,
like,
you know, Paul Thomas Anderson things where he sees a weird story and he's like, I'm just going to put that in a movie now.
Yeah, he's like, hey, maybe I can build a movie around that. So, but so that's really fun. I mean, that makes it because when you're watching it, you're thinking, well, this is the kind of silly thing that would only happen in a movie,
Yeah.
and then you're like, oh,
No, it's actual advice. Like,
Right.
pay attention to promotions because you never know.
read the fine print. Yeah, you might be able to fly anywhere you want for the rest of your life. So, let's talk about let's talk about having a cigarette break.
We'll have to pee,
And
actually.
okay,
This is a pee break,
let's
sir.
talk. Let's talk about nature calling.
Pee is fire.
Let's talk about Steve's urine burning his urethra. Okay, and
Call it Urethra Franklin.
let's see if I can do a live read here and hold the podcast in Steve's absence. No, we're not going to put you through that. We will take a break. So we're back from our break. I assume while we were gone, you heard from sponsors like Coca-Cola and General Motors because those are the type of companies that are clamoring to.
Coca-Cola called us, and General Motorboating is also interested.
Well,
so it's potential. It's somebody on the line.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to hear more from this General Motorboating. I'll tell you that.
I'm a fan of specific motorboating. I don't know if we can take them. Might be a conflict of interest.
Yeah, I mean, in general, that might get you into trouble. You want to be a little more particular.
Yeah.
When it comes to motorboating.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, let's talk about favorite scenes, favorite lines from Punch Drunk Love.
Yeah, you go first. I think
okay.
I always go first.
But okay, so I think that for my favorite scene, we'll do that first. I'm going to talk about the scene in which Sandler is driving home with Emily Watson, and then he's had this moment where they're basically in love. It's this new fresh love, and his life is finally kind of going right. This life of his where he hasn't fit in his whole existence, and then boom, out of nowhere, they get hit by the Mormon brothers. Their car spins out, and he sees the blood running down from her face, and
just like that one drop,
right,
little trickle.
Yeah, and it basically unleashes him in a way that's really interesting because we've seen him become unleashed in several other scenes, and he's almost like a maniac. He's this restrained rage, and when it comes out, he just goes crazy like an animal almost in the bathroom, punching the stall, trying to rip the hand dryer off the wall.
Oh, I did that to your grandma's bathroom.
Oh, during the break?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
please don't crack my fucking head open.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna have to address that off the air. But in this scene, there's a very striking contrast because he goes and he just dismantles these brothers. He punches the first one, and then he takes in sort of in one motion punches them, and then takes the crowbar out of his hands, and then takes out these other guys. But it's so efficient and it's so controlled.
Yeah, less of a bomb, more of a bullet.
Exactly, and I think it tells you this is a shift has happened in this character, that this relationship he now has changed him and has focused him in a new way, and it's a way to demonstrate that change in such an efficient fashion, in such a striking fashion from everything we've seen before, that it plays as a really deep commentary on his character in what is essentially an action scene that is also shot very interesting just for the way the action shot. I always find that I like action scenes almost like, I guess, the reverse of like a John Woo or something, where the action, instead of being kind of drawn out and stylized, is extremely to the point and quick, where it's almost over before it started. Another film that I think does that effectively is Michael Mann's Collateral, and the way all the violence in that plays out. It's like it's so quick and so brutal, and then before you can almost blink, it's like it's happened and it's over, and that's what this scene plays as well. So
yeah, it's almost reminiscent of the hammer fight scene in Old Boy.
okay,
A little bit. It's sort of just essentially just one take. When he gets out of the car, he just kind of moves in a straight line through these dudes like they're tissue paper.
right.
I'm very much a fan of that kind of action as well.
Yeah, and then the best part is he hands
Yeah.
the crowbar back to the last brother as if to say,
Yeah, this movie never loses its root in comedy. It's
Right.
always thinking about comedy, even in crazy situations like that.
yeah,
And it's funny, that's a fantastic scene. I would pick a scene that I really noticed, wanted to talk about this time around. That's almost a nice juxtaposition to that scene, and that's the scene where Sandler calls the phone sex line in his apartment, talking to the girl that eventually gets him in trouble when gets him all tied up with these guys. And it's just this one long take of him moving around his apartment, kind of sitting at the edge of frame in various points. He's that energy, that nervous energy that we're talking about, like, is on full display here. And he's so sort of confused, and there's such a loneliness to him that even when he's like very paranoid about her not knowing his name and not calling him by his name, which is Barry, then she slips up in the phone call later and calls him Barry, and he doesn't notice. He's
Right.
just like such a nervous ball of energy.
I think that's literally the last line of that scene, right? When she slips up and says Barry, and
Yeah.
then it fades out.
Yeah. So that's probably those two scenes, seeing like how far Emily Watson's character can shift Sandler's focus. Those are two. I mean, from this caged, nervous animal type of character into like essentially like a precision killing machine. Like it's pretty impressive. They bookend each other pretty nicely, and this movie's kind of built on those bookends because you see at the beginning this static, lonely shot, and then it's sort of the two of them brought together as the very last shot, and she says something. The line was like, "And here we go," Yep. And it's just like he starts off being on hold. And then she says, "Go," it's the last line of the movie. So
Very nice.
Good parentheticals there, Mr. Paul Thomas Anderson.
I one other scene that I thought about choosing because it's the subverting expectations thing again, and it reminds me also of the chase scene we talked about earlier. This is your bonus honorable mention scene.
Yeah.
Is when you have him, he wants to kiss her as he's leaving after their first date, but he doesn't do it, and so he goes all the way down to the lobby in her building, which is this labyrinthine, apartment building. And as he's about to walk out the door, there's a call down the front desk, and she says, "Oh, I really wanted to kiss you." And he hangs up, and then of course he has to go kiss her now, so he's running to go do it. And this is that scene again in the movie you've seen a million times where, okay, now the guy's gonna go get the girl, and it's this epic riding in on the white horse and making this grand romantic gesture. But then he can't find her because
it all looks the goddamn same.
Right, it's this drab, like monochromatic apartment complex that looks like every apartment complex you've ever been to, and he keeps running back and forth in the hallways and checking the numbers, which the arrows are pointing, in all these directions where it's hard to tell even which direction it means, for those numbers. And
and that's indicative of this sort of awkward quality that these two have, and
Right.
it does subvert the expectations of the romantic comedy, right? Because like when they meet in Hawaii, and there's that great, there's a lot of light and shadow play in this flick too, which I really enjoy. But there's that moment where they're both running towards each other for the embrace after being apart for some time, and it would be one of those typical romantic comedy moments, but they can't quite get it right. She sort of falls into him. He kind of staggers backwards. It's this very clumsy, very punch-drunk kind of love that they're going through.
that's weird. It's almost like that was
It has to be an accident.
yeah something they were going
Sometimes
for.
P.T. Anderson just gets a little sloppy.
That's and that reminds me, if that apartment complex reminds me of something else I thought of with this film, which is a contrast to the previous PTA films, which is the locations. And there's so much life and color in a lot of the locations in the previous films. In Boogie Nights and Magnolia, there's there's all this stuff going on in the background, and there's, you know, obviously all these characters going different directions, and you've got, you know, light and color and the disco that opens Boogie Nights and all this. And this film is just like drab, generic set after set, and it was clearly a conscious choice.
Sure.
You know, I mean, where you go to Sandler's office, which looks like it's, you know, in a like a storage unit basically, to that apartment complex, even to Hawaii, which, you know, Hawaii is a place, one of the most beautiful places on the planet, and basically any film that's ever shot there, you know, they have to do the sweeping shot coming over the mountains, and you see the greenery, and they eschew all that in this film, and instead they show you this scene in this generic looking resort that could be anywhere, even the beach scene, you know, like, and Sandler says, you know, oh, you know, this really looks like Hawaii or something, but it doesn't. It looks like it could be, they could just be sitting outside LA. It's just this little tight shot of them, you know, at this generic looking cafe with the beach in the background, but there's nothing particularly Hawaii-esque about it, other than, you know, there's some Hawaiian music or something playing in the background. So it's funny that that they chose to do that. They chose to have everything feel so generic and drained of life.
Yeah, he was having a lot of fun with this flick, man. That's why I love so much of it. It's why it's difficult to pick a favorite scene. It's got so many great lines. What's your favorite one?
You want me to go first?
I'll go first on this one. Mine's a bit of a... This is... you know, it's interesting because we were having a conversation yesterday about how... And you had referenced Julianne Moore and how powerful it is when someone can do what someone can do that you might not expect them to do with words that if you saw them written down, you would think, oh, that's interesting. But when they're spoken aloud, like that's really the transformative power of cinema. And for me, if I saw this line written down, it's no big deal. But to have it delivered by the perhaps underused, but I would argue still perfectly used in this instance, Luis Guzman, when Barry is talking and they're sort of talking over each other, and he asks where Barry's going, he says Barry says he's going to Hawaii, and Luis Guzman comes in with, "You're going to Hawaii? That's so wonderful, you're going to Hawaii." And just that delivery every time cracks me up. I cannot watch the movie without laughing at that very simple line because Guzman kills it.
Yeah. It's definitely a fun delivery, and like I said, I mean, Luis Guzman can pretty much make your film better if you put him in it. So
yeah,
you should do so if you have the opportunity.
Yeah, all he's doing is repeating back what someone's told him, right. And it cracks me up.
So my line that I chose is from the other PTA stalwart. Ah, yes. You probably see this one coming from Hoffman. Yeah. But it's one of the later lines in the film. But it's just so perfect and so funny the way that it comes off is, you know, they've had this whole argument where Sandler's threatening him, and he's basically saying, "You say that's that, and I'll walk away, but otherwise, you know, you're gonna face my wrath." And so he says, "Okay, that's that." And then Sandler's walking away, and he's almost out the door. And just as he's getting the door, here comes Hoffman and says, "Get the fuck out of here, you pervert!" And then Sandler turns around, ready to attack him, and just as he's got like 5 steps into the assault, when suddenly Hoffman says, "That's that," and he walks away. And those 2 words. And the funniest part is that it works. It completely like short circuits Sandler's berserker mode as soon as he says it, and then he walks out of frame very quickly. Yeah,
Philip Seymour Hoffman's villain in this in this movie is such an interesting character because he doesn't seem to have any grand scheme. He just basically seems to be a dickhead, but he's a very self-important dickhead. Right. And he's somehow managed to be at the top of the Republican Party nomination. Oh, wait, whoops.
Different guy, easy to confuse.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's it is funny, you're right, because when he gets introduced, you have this feeling that he's going to be a mastermind, and maybe this comes back to the word we've said, you know, a million times now, subverting expectations.
Fire! Oh.
Which
I just subverted your expectations with fire!
Which if you're playing a drinking game at home and taking a shot every time we say subverting expectations, you're probably dead quite a while ago. But you know, you think he's going to be some kind of mastermind or some criminal genius, but he's not really at all. He's just an asshole.
Right and proper asshole too. Just like Barry just calling him, just shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. That's a great.
I like when he kind of plays it off too. He's like, "Excuse me," and he's like, "No, what's the problem?" You know?
Yeah.
Like he didn't just tell him to shut the fuck up. Anyway, so anyway, good flick. Check it out, and then
see if you agree with Kyle or you agree with me.
Yeah, and if you agree with Steve, you're wrong.
Yeah, and if you agree with Kyle, you're handsome.
And this coming week, we are going to be watching the next film in the series, which is There Will Be Blood. So if you want to tune in next week and hear what we have to say about that.
Have you seen that more than once?
I've seen it twice.
Okay. That's how many times I've seen it.
Okay.
So this should be interesting.
Well, I've seen it 3 times then.
Well, then I've never seen it.
I've held the DVD in these 2 giant hands of mine.
I just drank a lot of milkshakes for a period of time. Okay. That counts.
Okay, little Steve. So anyway, so that's enough of the movie business. What's going on with music, Steve? Anything? Is modern music still a thing?
Modern music, surprisingly, Kyle, although art is dead in general, modern music alive and kicking. And they say the heart of rock and roll is still beating. That's a deep Huey Lewis and the News quote. Which I'm not doing. What I am talking about...
Is that the actor who was in Back to the Future? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's the hint. Gwyneth Paltrow's dad.
I only know movies.
So what we're going to be talking about musically today is I am continuing with the mystery thematically tied elements going through March, and
on the edge of my seat.
You'll be happy to know I figured out what the prize is going to be. If you can guess the theme, you can tweet that to us, and you will be getting a prize. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I just want to assure you I've figured it out.
Are they guessing what the prize is, or are they guessing what the theme is?
No, they're guessing what the theme is. And then they're getting the prize.
What if they guess what the prize is?
What
if they guess what the prize is?
If they guess what the prize is, I'll be more surprised than if they guess what the theme is. But if they guess what the prize is, then I'll give them a theme. Wait, that doesn't make any sense. So we've had a little discussion about Happy Valley, and I wanted to stick with the geographic features. So the song that you should listen to is Convict Lake. It's by a gentleman named John Vanderslice. So we talked about the Nick, and this is John Vanderslice. Okay. He's also, this is a solo project by him, this particular song. But you may know him if you're in the kind of hipster nerd rocky world as the lead singer of the Mountain Goats. You familiar with the Mountain Goats? So we have mountains, valleys, lakes, slices, nicks. It's all there.
Are we talking about the animal or?
This is actually a band who I would definitely say is worth checking out. They do some interesting things. They have an album. Their most recent album, I believe, is called The Mountain Goats Beat the Champ. And the entire album is a theme album centering around professional wrestling, the life of a professional wrestler.
Well, that sounds very exciting.
So it's there's cerebral lyrics. There's a lot of humor to be found in the music. It's oftentimes upbeat and oftentimes orchestral. Convict Lake in particular has some great sort of orchestral elements to it. If you're a fan of Ben Folds, if you're a fan of Sufjan Stevens or Iron and Wine, if you like Mickey Rourke, if you think
you're pretty much just covering everybody.
If you think that Rufus Wainwright is a little too dramatic, then the John Vanderslice and the Mountain Goats are a good recommendation for you. So definitely check them out. Did you listen to some St. Vincent? St. Vincent I did last week, right?
I did indeed.
And what was your takeaway from that?
Well, I did enjoy it very much. I think that it was reminiscent. She was reminiscent in some ways to me of Alanis Morissette, which, you know, in the 90s was the last time I listened to any music, so all my references are going to be based out of the 90s.
I think it's fair.
but yeah, there was. I think that the song that got stuck in my head was called. What was it called? It was like something Johnny. I should have written it down, but anyway, that song in particular really stuck with me, and it was playing in my head for several days after I listened to it. But yeah, I liked it.
Enjoyed it.
Another strong recommendation out of the mouth of Steve.
We do what we can. Yeah, I think you're going to be interested in these mountain goat cats because they're a little bit different. Some of the stuff I'm trying to take you into some different places musically. Mm-hmm. No, not feed you too much of the same stuff. So if Bill Nye the Science Guy had a band, this would probably be his band. So it might be worth checking out.
So the Mountain Goats, and the album is
the album is Beat the Champ. The Mountain Goats Beat the Champ. It's sort of plays out like a sentence. But so the Mountain Goats Beat the Champ.
By the Mountain Goats.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And John Vanderslice's song, the individual song, Convict Lake.
Is John Vanderslice's real name? It seems like too cool of a name.
It's a pretty cool name. But I mean, it's not like he's Cheech Vanderslice or something. Like John's fairly generic, so I think it's probably real.
Well, I will definitely check them out, and I would like to follow the rise and fall of a professional wrestler. As channeled through the music of the Mountain Goats.
Yeah, it does take me back to my professional wrestling watching days. There was a time at which I was pretty heavily invested in what the hell was going on with Rocky Maivia.
Yeah.
So.
Whatever happened to that guy?
I think he went to work for General Motorboarding.
Is that
motorboarding?
Is that like a
it's like a motor fluid, motor oil, waterboarding. That's the way that Trump is going to torture every terrorist once he gets into office.
I knew Dick Cheney would make his way back into this podcast somehow. All right, well, so just as modern music is still a thing, so are books, Steve.
Oh, what?
I have one right here, actually.
Oh my God, that's an honest-to-God dead tree book.
Yeah, I know. You haven't seen one of these in a while.
No.
But I decided to bring it in because this book is... called The Deep Blue Goodbye by John D. MacDonald, who is a very prolific writer, has written a ton of books, but probably his most popular series is what's called the Travis McGee series. And this book is actually the first book in that series. So if you're looking for a series to get into, this is a good one.
How many books are in the series?
I don't know, something like... probably like 25 or something.
Jesus.
There's a lot. They're fast reads. I mean, but
McGeezus.
But yeah, so basically the Travis McGee character is a guy who is more or less a beach bum. Just hangs out, has a houseboat that he hangs out on in the Florida Keys, and just has a fun time in the surf and sand. But every once in a while, like what he says is he basically takes his entire retirement in installments. So he's a relatively young guy. He's like in his 30s or something. But what he does is every once in a while someone will approach him through some fashion, and they'll need something recovered. It calls it a salvage service in a way that they can't involve the police or anything else. So he's the guy that they come to, and then he figures out a way to recover it, and if he does, then he basically keeps 50%. So they get 50% of something instead of 0%, and then he gets the other 50%, which he then lives on for the next 9 months or 12 months or whatever till the next salvage.
I finally have something I want to be when I grow up.
I know, this is the thing. This is my dream. Like, I want to be this person. I want to be a beach bum that gets into adventures like every 6 to 9 months, and cracks a case. So it's the perfect life. The books started. This is the first book. It was written in 1964, so it's sort of right in the heart of that Mad Men era. But obviously a very different place than Midtown Manhattan. So. It's a very it's a really fun character, and it's a fun series, but obviously the thing that sets MacDonald apart, I mean, is the actual writing, the quality of the writing, and he's I mean, obviously, just like with almost everybody I read and I recommend, of course, the sentence structure is great, and the way he's able to weave together his dialogue, he's really a master of dialogue. And this is a very dialogue-driven thing, which is one of the reasons it reads so fast. But the thing that I think sets MacDonald apart from some of the other writers of his ilk, for example, Donald Westlake or some of the other sort of masters of noir like this, is that he has, even like Lawrence Block or somebody who I really like, and I like both those writers and recommend them strongly. But the thing I think that about MacDonald that I like is he has a way of, digressing into these introspective moments with his characters or into this social commentary. So like the inner monologue of his characters are so interesting, and McGee in particular is always thinking about the world around him and taking a hard look at himself. And so I wanted to just read a couple of passages.
A dramatic reading.
I know. First time on the podcast.
Kyle Gherkin. Dude, just subverting people's expectations.
I know. That's what it's all about here on the Pod Couple. So I did I just wanted to give a demonstration. I mean, it's all fun for me to tell you these words, but nothing like hearing it for yourself. So anyway, this won't be too long, so don't turn off the podcast. But this first section is showing again his introspection. He's just finished having sex with a young woman, and he says, "I could have gone to sleep at once if I could have convinced myself that everything was just peachy fine. But I felt I had maneuvered myself into a rather nasty little corner. Where does responsibility stop? Do you buy the cripple a shoeshine box and then send it out into the traffic? I had the feeling I now owned this sleeping thing. True, it was a splendid specimen, good bones, a true heart, and a marvelous pelt. It could cook and adore, and it had a talent for making love. Sew it into burlap and roll it in the mud, and it would still be unmistakably a lady. You could take it anywhere. But I wasn't built for owning, nor for anything which lasts. I could mend her spirit, only to go and break her loving heart, and she would probably think it a poor bargain when the time came. All the little gods of irony must whoop and weep and roll on the floors of Olympus when they tune in on the night thoughts of a truly fatuous male. And I hold several international records."
That's dope, man.
Yeah.
That burlap line is killer.
Yeah. Very good. So anyway, so that's just a little taste of that, and as far as the social commentary stuff, I mean, again, this stuff is just sprinkled throughout. It's not none of this. It's nice because he weaves it into the narrative. It's not like he's stopping and giving you a big, political speech. It just fits in with what's happening with the action. So just like a paragraph here, a paragraph there, and this is an example where he's talking about having to use a credit card. Remember, this is 1964. Credit cards are not that standard a thing at this time, but they're really coming into vogue. And so he's saying, like, he has the choice to use the credit card here, and he says, "But these are the last remaining years of choice. In the stainless nurseries of the future, the feds will work their way through all the squalling pinkness, tattooing a combination tax number and credit number on one wrist, followed closely by the IT&T team putting the permanent phone number, Visa phone doubtless, on the other wrist. Die and your number goes back to the bank. It will be the first provable immortality the world has ever known."
Yeah,
so,
pretty much nailed it.
Yeah. So
if I could put on my director's hat for a moment, Kyle, next time, just do what Philip Seymour Hoffman would do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but otherwise, very good.
Yeah, that was my version of reading by Philip Seymour Hoffman, which apparently I failed at.
Well, as long as you get back up.
Yeah. So, well, anyway, next time I'll try to do better with the readings, or probably better yet for the audience, won't read anything at all.
No, I like it.
So, but yeah,
who cares what the audience thinks? I don't do this for them. You hear me? You animals!
Clearly, we're not doing this for the audience. I don't think anyone had any confusion on that point, but. Anyway, yeah. So check out John D. MacDonald, and if you want to start the Travis McGee series, then go with The Deep Blue Goodbye, and you can work your way through another 25 books if you like that one. So
hey, if I finish one, I might as well finish 25.
Yeah, plenty more where that came from. So, all right, and there are plenty more podcasts where this came from.
Yeah, at least
Starting-
25.
Starting, well, let's not,
Okay, at
overpromise.
One.
Yeah, I mean, 50% chance of
Right.
there being another one anyway. So, but you should definitely check it out next week and see if we actually make another one. And the way you can do that is by subscribing on iTunes or Stitcher or Blueberry, or just follow us on Twitter at The Pod Couple, and you can see, because I post on there for the 7 followers that we have every time that we put one of these out. So that's going to be a wrap for this week, I believe, unless you have any parting thoughts, Steve?
No, that's it. Just thanks to everyone who's listening, and thanks for all the positive feedback that we have been getting.
Yeah, you guys are awesome. Our listeners have been very supportive and enthusiastic, and it is much appreciated. So with that, we're going to sign off for the week.
It's time to go motorboarding.
All right, well,
specifically.
All right, we're going to workshop the sign off,
but
that's
a good
every
week.
Yeah,
man.
we need to
blow it.
Anyway.
Okay, we're the
Pod Couple. That was terrible.